This is Mission Control, Houston. Good evening. You're getting a live look at the inside of the International Space Station. This is a camera inside the U.S. Laboratory Destiny. In the background there is Node 2, one of the U.S. nodes. Floating inside is the crew of the Axiom Mission 1. You can see a few of the crew members suited in their SpaceX launch and entry suits. Thank you for joining us. Today is April 24th. We're witnessing the conclusion of Axiom Mission 1. The four private astronauts, are about to enter the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Mission 1 capsule, for the journey home in a splashdown off the coast of Florida. The two mission specialists of the mission, Eitan Stibbe and Mark Pathy, are in their launch and entry suits. Some hugs and handshakes, farewells for the crew on board the International Space Station, the Expedition 67 crew. Namely, inside Node 1 for the Expedition 67 crew is the crew of Crew 3, SpaceX's other capsule attached to the International Space Station's forward port. SpaceX Dragon Endurance. It includes NASA astronauts Raja Chari, Kayla Barron, and Tom Marshburn, and European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer. Of course, to round out the Axiom Mission 1 crew, we have the commander of the mission, Michael López-Alegría, and the pilot, Larry Connor. López-Alegría and Connor are responsible for getting the other mission specialists situated in their launch and entry suits and getting the Dragon configured for the journey home. What we're witnessing now is the final moments before the crew is about to ingress the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and close the hatch. Per the nominal timeline, the hatch closure is scheduled for about 20 minutes from now, and that will kick off a sequence of other events to prepare for undocking about 2.5 hours from this moment. After several delays due to weather, the SpaceX, Axiom, and NASA teams were able to give a go for an undocking tonight at 7:55 p.m. Central Time. With a 7:55 p.m. Central Time undocking, it will be about a 16-hour journey in space in low Earth orbit until they splash down off the coast of Florida about just a little after 12 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, April 25th, or after 1 p.m. Central Time, or 1 p.m. Eastern Time, off the coast of Florida. There are several landing sites that the teams are monitoring for weather. The prime landing site as of this evening is Jacksonville, Florida. The Axiom crew saying their goodbyes to Expedition 67. It's been quite a journey. What was originally scheduled for 8 days aboard the orbiting laboratory turned into 15. A crew of 11 passengers on board the International Space Station have been working harmoniously throughout those 15 days on a variety of experiments, both in support of the Expedition 67 mission, the long-duration stay aboard the International Space Station, and the first private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, of which included more than 25 different experiments for the crew of 4 private astronauts conducting in the orbiting laboratory.
Station Houston on 2 for Tom and SSCs at your convenience.
Again, Expedition 67 crew members and Axiom Mission 1 crew members in Node 2. The Dragon is on the zenith port, or the space-facing side, so towards the ceiling is where the crew members will be ingressing and entering their Dragon. In the foreground there you see NASA astronaut Caleb Barron, part of the final farewell for the Axiom crew. Tom Marshburn floating off to the right there into the Columbus module. Marshburn will take the prime responsibility for monitoring the departure of Dragon. Just before we started our coverage, Marshburn was setting up his monitoring tools, making sure they were all good.
Hey, Tom. We still need to downlink some data from 2 of the Axiom crew members' SSCs. It's SSC 10 and SSC 19. From Roger's crew note earlier, we think that SSC 10 is an endurance. So just at your convenience, if you can get those 2 SSCs on the network, we'd appreciate it so we can get that data. One other thing for you, if you guys are willing, we'd be happy to have a camera on in Node 2. We'd appreciate the entertainment.
Okay, you can copy that, Laura. So you're looking for 10 and 19 to get those hooked back up to the network. We'll check to see if 10's in endurance. And the Node 2 camera will point it at the hatch. We've got half the crew that's headed in there and the other half going in, so we'll set that up.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
What you're hearing is some of the several steps to get the Axiom crew situated before that hatch is closed, making sure they have all of their items and all the check boxes have been verified, that the teams both inside the Dragon capsule as well as the teams on the ground can give a go for proceeding for undocking. We did hear prior to the start of our coverage at the 2.5-hour mark that the International Space Station flight control teams gave their go to proceed, the weather continuing to look good for the landing opportunities off the eastern coast of Florida. So they gave the go to proceed with the steps to go ahead and close the hatch.
Node 2 Cam 1 is up and on.
Copy. Thank you. We'll be coming on board.
Endeavor, this is LA from Seat 3. How do you hear?
And Endeavor, this is SpaceX on the Big Loop. We heard you probably about 2 by 5 on Space to Ground 2 there. How me?
This is LA responding on the Big Loop. How copy?
And LA, I've got you about 2 by 5 there on the Big Loop. How me? Okay, copy that. At this point in time, can I get a comm check from the pilot in seat 2 on the Big Loop?
He cannot. He had an earpiece fall out, so he's off trying to fix that.
Okay, copy that. Had an earpiece fall out, so he's fixing that. When he is ready, go ahead and give me a call on the Big Loop.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're following along with the procedures to get the crew ready to go ahead and close the hatch and get ready for an on-time docking tonight, 7:55 p.m. Central Time. Part of that is configuring what's called the Big Loop. This is an integrated communications loop between the NASA, SpaceX, and Axiom teams. So the space-to-ground loops that you hear on board the International Space Station are fully integrated with the communications on board SpaceX Dragon Endeavour. What you were just hearing was a communications check on board the spacecraft, on board Dragon Endeavour. They're working through the procedures to make sure that they are configured with the right communications loop, and the audio is coming in crystal clear. Again, the Axiom Mission 1 commander is Michael López-Alegría. We'll also be hearing from Axiom 1 or Ax-1 pilot Larry Connor. This is Mission Control Houston, now getting a shot inside the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour vehicle of the Ax-1 mission. You're seeing the commander of the mission, Michael López-Alegría, floating, getting the Dragon itself situated, preparing for the crew members of the Ax-1 mission. As commander, he'll be one of the last to get suited in the SpaceX launch and entry suits. Of course, you have seen in Node 2 already in their suits the mission specialist, Eitan Stibbe, and Mark Pathy, both in their suits. They'll be flanking the outside seats that you see from this view during the journey home. López-Alegría will take the seat, the second from the right. Underneath the seats, you're seeing all the cargo that comes with the Axiom crew back for a splashdown off the coast of Florida. During the past couple of days, including earlier this morning, the crew finished up packing the last of that cargo, some of which includes about more than 200 pounds of science and hardware, some of which is NASA science, including some biological experiments. The Crew 3 astronauts no stranger to the SpaceX launch and entry suits, helping out the mission specialists get their suits situated, perfectly fit for the journey home. The Crew 3 astronauts, including Rajachari, Tom Marshburn, and Caleb Barron of NASA, and Matthias Maurer of the European Space Agency, ESA, also took a Dragon capsule up to the International Space Station, SpaceX Dragon Endurance. That's at the far side, just behind them, towards the forward end of the International Space Station. You're now seeing a live view from Node 2 at the very forward end of the International Space Station, looking up at the zenith port of the International Space Station. This is the port where the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Mission 1 vehicle, is docked. In the foreground there is International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn.
Houston Station on 2 for SSC follow-up.
Go ahead, Raja.
I just wanted to clarify the SSC 19 you were talking about. Is that one already on the network, or were you saying you can't see that?
We cannot see it on the network.
Okay, copy. We think that's the airlock one, so Kayla's going to take a look at that, and 10 will be back up on the network shortly.
Copy, thanks.
Six Endeavour C2 on the big loop. How do you copy?
And Larry, I've got you 5x5 from C2 on the big loop. How me?
Mike, great to hear your voice. I hear you 5x5.
Okay, copy that. Stand by 1. I just want to do one quick check here, but that will complete our first test for the audio checkouts on C2 and C3. So stand by 1 for some further action.
Mike, if I could, one slight clarification. You're just slightly scratchy, but very audible.
Copy. Slightly scratchy, but still audible.
You're just joining us. You're getting a live view of the International Space Station. On the right, you see a lab view from the U.S. lab into Node 2, the forward end of the International Space Station, docked to the zenith side, or the space-facing side. You can see them all looking up, almost towards the ceiling. That's on the view on the left. That's the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour is docked there. On the other side of the hatch is the Axiom Mission 1 crew. They're getting situated, preparing for closing the hatch and going through the sequence of getting ready for undocking tonight at 7:55 p.m. Central Time. You've heard some of the communications checks from on board the Dragon, from the pilot of the mission, of the Ax-1 mission, Larry Connor, the mission specialist flanking both sides of the middle seats. So on the far sides of the Dragon include mission specialist Eitan Stibbe and mission specialist Mark Pathy. The Ax-1 commander is Michael López-Alegría. And taking some photos in the hatch right now is the commander of the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn. His duties today include preparing the private astronauts for their undocking. He'll also be taking the prime responsibility of monitoring the procedure from the International Space Station. In the foreground there, grabbing his launch and entry suit, is Mission Specialist Mark Pathy. You can see by the Canadian flag representing Canada on this mission. Seated in the middle seats, more towards the foreground here, you can see the pilot of the mission, Larry Connor, and then to his right in the commander position is Michael López-Alegría.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop, comm check.
SpaceX Endeavour have you loud and clear on the big loop.
And Larry, I have you 5x5 from seat 2. Can I also get a comm check from MLA in seat 3 on the big loop?
From the C3, how do you hear?
Okay, LA, I still probably have you about, I would say, 2x5, but this does complete the test that we want to do for audio troubleshooting. When able, you and Larry can swap back to your original seats.
So a minor correction, while we were getting that view inside the Dragon, on the middle left seat is the pilot position. However, Michael López-Alegría is currently seated in that position with pilot Larry Connor in the commander seat. They'll of course swap back for the flight home, but in the meantime, during these audio checks, they have swapped seats. Again, Commander Tom Marshburn, International Space Station Commander, in the hatchway between the International Space Station and Crew Dragon Endeavour, snapping some photos, watching the crew getting some of their items ready, and of course their suits on, getting through some of those procedures, preparing for an undock tonight. Again, that's 7:55 p.m. Central Time. He'll take the prime role of monitoring the undocking and exit through the what's called approach ellipsoid. That marks the end of joint operations. From there, NASA will of course be watching, but the prime responsibility and role of getting the private astronauts home falls to the SpaceX and Axiom Space teams. In the foreground there, you see to the right is Mission Specialist Mark Pathy. Climbing into the pilot seat is the pilot, that is Axiom Mission 1 pilot Larry Connor. Eitan Stiba in the background there, also not in his launch and entry suit. He and Pathy will get situated in the suit prior to undock. The suit is required for the dynamic phases of the mission. That includes the undocking phase, when the Dragon itself physically separates from the International Space Station. The suits themselves provide an extra layer of protection. During the 16-hour transit, they will have the opportunity to remove the suits and air them out, get a little bit more comfortable, have a meal. It's about a 16-hour journey from undocking until they actually splash down off the coast of Florida. But of course, before that final sequence of preparing for the deorbit burn and the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere.
Endeavour, this is Houston on the Big Loop. We'll take voice checks from each of you at your convenience.
We just lost the view, but from the International Space Station cameras, you were seeing the Expedition 67 crew watching the private astronauts work their way to prepare for closing the hatch and, of course, undocking tonight. Weather has been not very cooperative for the private astronauts to return. It was originally scheduled for about an 8-day mission aboard the International Space Station. We ended up at about 15, primarily due to bad weather around the multiple landing sites identified around the coast of Florida. Because of that, the crew have been adjusting their sleep to support multiple undocking opportunities that we've seen throughout the past week. Today is an abbreviated day by the private astronauts and the Crew 3 astronauts, who are, of course, helping the private astronauts to work through their procedures before closing the hatch, making sure that they're ready to support the step-by-step instructions for a safe undocking from the International Space Station. Prior to undocking tonight, the crew will get an early night's sleep, or well, they've shifted their sleep, so they're up a little later than they normally are, but they'll get an early rest, and Monday will be a catch-up day for them to get through some of the typical weekend cleaning activities.
We get to about 3 by 5, just coming in just a little quiet.
We've been having trouble with it. I have you loud and clear for what it's worth.
Yep, copy. We were expecting that.
So a quick rundown of the sequence that we'll see over the next couple of hours. Of course, we're still waiting for the hatch closure. We'll continue our coverage until we see the Dragon hatch close. That is, of course, one of several hatches that have to close to begin the undocking sequence. Another critical hatch is the what's called the A-pass hatch. It's the hatch closest to the Dragon hatch. Once that's closed, there will be a space in between the two hatches called the vestibule. And both of those are required to be closed to depressurize the space in between the International Space Station and the Dragon. That sets up for the Dragon to be able to undock. That sequence is set to, once the Dragon hatches are closed, that sequence will be about an hour long. Once the pressure in between the vestibule has to go from about the pressure inside the International Space Station, which is about the pressure of sea level on Earth, so a little over 14 pounds per square inch. So that has to go down to vacuum. In that time, it takes a pit stop at about 5 pounds per square inch, and they sit there for a little bit to do a leak check and make sure that the pressure itself is holding and there are no leaks before they actually proceed down to vacuum. Now they stay there for a little bit because there's a little bit of oscillation in the pressure to get a good reading before they can confidently say that there are no leaks, and then they proceed down to vacuum. If we stick to the timeline as we see it now, that sequence should be complete right about the time that we start our coverage for undocking. We're scheduled to start our undocking coverage tonight around 7:30 p.m., right before the scheduled undocking time at 7:55. Once we start our coverage, the teams will be preparing for a go, no-go poll. One final step, of course, they did say go at the 2.5-hour mark prior to undocking to proceed with the following steps. But it's one final check to make sure everything looks good, including weather, down at the landing sites before they go ahead and proceed with the undocking command. The undocking command now is scheduled to take place at about 7:50 p.m. It's about a 5-minute sequence. Once that command is initiated, it begins the retraction of the umbilicals that have been providing power and communications, data in between the Dragon and the International Space Station. That will retract. And right now, the Dragon is being held to the International Space Station by a hard mate of 12 hooks. They'll release them 6 at a time, and to release any stiction, they'll do a couple of what's called undocking burns. They're very short pulses to actually physically separate the Dragon from the International Space Station. That undocking burn and the physical separation, again, scheduled 7:55 p.m. Central. When we start our coverage, we'll be joined by our colleagues at SpaceX and Axiom Space over in Hawthorne. You're now getting a view of the International Space Station Flight Control Room. The teams here working together with the teams at Axiom Space and at SpaceX to oversee the operations that we're covering right now, the ingress of the private astronaut crew of Axiom Mission 1 and the hatch closure. The teams here support the International Space Station flight operations, monitoring the International Space Station vehicle as a whole, and of course the Expedition 67 crew aboard. For this shift, for the Orbit 3 shift, we're led by Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield. The voice you're hearing as the Capcom here in the room, that's communicating with the Expedition 67 crew, namely, but also with the private astronaut crew on occasion, is Capcom Laura Beachy. Now getting some of those views from space back, we have some pretty good coverage throughout our coverage of the hatch closure of Axiom Mission 1. So these gaps will be pretty intermittent and short, luckily, for our coverage, and of course we'll continue to provide live views until the hatch between the Dragon and the International Space Station is closed, the Dragon hatch.
Houston Endeavor, we're in step 3.4 and checking for debris. Correction, we're in 3.4. We're checking for desired LIO configuration.
Endeavor, this is SpaceX. We're with you in step 3.4. We're looking for Mark to swap into LIO cartridge 1. How copy?
Yeah, Mike, it's in work. We'll advise.
Okay, copy that, Larry. And just for your guys' awareness, we're still doing pretty good here on the timeline, about 5 minutes behind what we have scheduled, but no concerns.
That's 5 minutes behind in monitoring.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're getting live views from inside the cabin of SpaceX Dragon Endeavor. The Axiom Mission 1 crew situated, going through their procedures, getting ready for undocking later tonight. At the communications, in the pilot seat, you see Ax-1 Commander Larry Connor talking with the SpaceX mission director about some of the procedures, including LIO canisters, that's lithium hydroxide, canisters that are responsible for scrubbing carbon dioxide in the Dragon cabin throughout the transit from the International Space Station to Earth, which is, of course, for this particular undocking, the transit time is a little more than 16 hours. In their seats, you see Larry Connor in the foreground. In the background, in the commander seat, Ax-1 Commander Michael López-Alegría. To the right of the frame there is International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn, just helping out the private astronaut crew. Mission specialists getting situated in their launch and entry suits. You can see off in the back there. Marshburn helping out mission specialist Eitan Stibbe with the launch and entry suits. Off frame, but probably either behind or to the right, is the other mission specialist. You can see the empty seat in the very foreground there on the bottom left of your screen. That seat meant for mission specialist Mark Pathy. In the background, still donning or putting on his launch and entry suit, mission specialist Eitan Stibbe, being aided by International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn you see in the bottom right of your frame. You heard from the SpaceX mission director. We're slightly behind the timeline as we go through our procedures tonight, just about 5 minutes. Still trending towards being able to undock at the anticipated 7:55 p.m. Central Time tonight. But we'll continue to track as they work their way through these procedures, and again, we'll continue to cover live here until the hatch for Dragon is closed. After the hatch to Dragon is closed, there is a number of procedures that take place, and we'll be off air for the remainder of the hatch closing, including the APAS hatch and the hatch in between Node 2 and the pressurized mating adapter 3 that's on the space-facing port. That's the pressurized mating adapter that leads, it's the sort of tunnel that you were seeing earlier that leads to the Dragon hatch, and of course inside the Dragon vehicle that we're seeing here. Now again, in about the 2.5-hour mark prior to undocking, the space station mission control teams did a poll to make sure that we were still go from a space station perspective, and of course from a weather perspective, trajectory perspective, making sure everything was good for a docking tonight and a splashdown off the coast of Florida, scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. The splashdown time is a little bit after 1 p.m. Eastern Time, precisely 1:06 p.m. For an on-time splashdown of the Ax-1 crew, the teams will quickly get together and continue to monitor the opportunities for the Crew 4 launch, which is at the heels of this mission. Of course, the International Docking Adapter ports on the International Space Station currently occupied by 2 Crew Dragons. We need to undock this one in order to make room for the Crew 4 Dragon Freedom.
Endeavor, LIO configured at 2315.
Copy that, Endeavor. LIO configured at 2315. At this time, your go to proceed with the IMV teardown and hatch closure per 2.103.
In work.
Those LIO canisters, again, lithium hydroxide, that's carbon dioxide from the Dragon cabin on the 16-hour transit. Once the hatches are closed and once we're no longer relying on space station air, which you see, the ventilation ducts that supplied space station air to the Dragon are being removed. So now we'll be moving over to relying on the SpaceX Dragon Endeavor's environmental control and life support systems for the journey home, just making sure that everything's configured properly. Again, that journey home 16-hour splashdown tomorrow afternoon, shortly after 1 p.m. That sets us up for a launch of Crew 4 Dragon Freedom, which the destination is, of course, the International Space Station and the port that the Axiom crew is going to leave from. Now, the turnaround time, the scheduled launch time for Crew 4 is 3:52 and 55 seconds a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, the 27th. The transit time to the International Space Station is a little more than 17 hours, 17 hours 22 minutes for a same-day arrival of 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time on the 27th, 8:15 p.m. Central Time. 1:15 a.m. on Thursday, the 28th GMT. Teams will continue to monitor the weather and other systems to ensure for that launch opportunity, and can of course readdress launch options should they need it. Another loss of signal. In the meantime, we'll show you the docking ports and where we're at right now. You can see lots of visiting vehicles on board the International Space Station. The Axiom Mission 1 Dragon, SpaceX Dragon Endeavour taking the Zenith port. You can see they were working what looked like the ceiling if you were inside the International Space Station. And then, of course, on the forward end is the SpaceX Crew 3 Dragon Endurance.
Any crew member, if you could just confirm for us that you can hear the Endeavour crew from station, we'd appreciate that.
Capcom Laura Beachy reaching out to the International Space Station crew, making sure the communications are solid. They are, of course, in the graphic here in the Dragon that's on the Zenith or space-facing side. Once that undocks, that's where the Crew 4 Dragon or SpaceX Dragon Freedom will dock. If launched on time on early Wednesday morning, it will dock late Wednesday evening. Again, the handovers we're expecting here will be relatively brief. We're getting some pretty good video and audio communications all around for these procedures as we're witnessing the private astronaut crew ingressing, entering the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Mission 1 crew vehicle for the ride home. Undocking tonight, scheduled 7:55 p.m. Central Time. There is a window of opportunity of about an hour in case there's any flexibility needed, but as the SpaceX mission director reported, right now we're just a little bit behind the timeline, but could possibly make it up during the next procedures of closing various hatches and depressurizing the vestibule in between the two hatches, the Dragon hatch and the International Space Station hatch, getting ready for that undocking tonight. You're getting a live view from inside SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, the Axiom Space crew of private astronauts working through their procedures to get buckled up, situated, make sure the carbon dioxide canisters and communications are all set for their undocking. They're being aided in the hatchway there that you're seeing from this shot, this camera being positioned in node 2, pointing straight up or towards the space-facing side, the Zenith side.
The hatch in 3.8.
SpaceX copies.
And there you have it, the International Space Station Commander, NASA astronaut Tom Marshburn, working on closing the hatch.
SpaceX Endeavour hatch is closed.
Copy that, Larry. We see the same. Ground is going to be commanding the flight computer state here shortly, at which point in time Aton will be able to confirm his final step in location 1.
Copy that, Mike.
And you heard it confirmed from the Ax-1 pilot, Larry Connor. The hatches to the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the private astronaut crew inside were closed at 6:26 p.m. Central Time. Now, a sequence of events will occur in between our coverage. We're going to wrap up here shortly, but in the meantime, what will happen is on the other side of the hatch, the International Space Station Commander Tom Marshburn, his job is not done. He's got a couple more hatches that he has to close, including the A-Pass hatch. Of course, he's taking some photography, making sure there's no FOD or foreign object debris, making sure that the hatch has an airtight seal before he continues methodically, step by step, to close the hatches and begin the depressurization sequence. Once those hatches are closed, it's going to create an area in between the two hatches called the vestibule, which will be at the space station pressure above 14 pounds per square inch. We got to get that down to zero near vacuum. It's a very methodical process that takes about an hour, so we'll continue to monitor that while we're off air, and then of course we'll go through the sequence of undocking. Once the undocking command is sent, it'll be about 5 minutes of hatches unlatching and umbilicals retracting, and of course a couple of thrusts to actually physically push the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour away from the International Space Station. We're still tracking towards an undocking on time for now at 7:55 p.m. Central Time. Stay tuned for our coverage. We'll be joined by SpaceX and Axiom Space for our undocking coverage, where you can get the latest undocking times, and we'll be covering the operations as they undock and exit the approach ellipsoid. This is about a 1 kilometer sphere, a little bit more than that, around the International Space Station. It's really a marker for the end of joint operations. Once they're outside of the vicinity of the International Space Station, the flight of the Ax-1 private astronauts and the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour to a splashdown off the coast of Florida is truly in the hands of SpaceX and Axiom Space. But in the meantime, that'll do it for us here in Mission Control Houston and NASA TV for our coverage. Again, we'll be staying tuned and for all of the procedures. Right now, our coverage for undocking is scheduled to start at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Until then, this is Mission Control Houston.